Hi, and welcome to another episode of Time Extend. My name is Adam Ismail, and today I'm joined by...
Brendan Rorison, and well, today, Adam, we are going back to our usual agenda after a very fun last episode with Kenny Ibrahim and talking about the ways in which Sega Rally's co-driver came about. We thought we'd keep up this momentum, that we were making through a lot of older games recently and series in general, perhaps, that we've not talked about enough. And I think today's subject, Midnight Club, is definitely an example of a series that perhaps we've mentioned in passing, but we have never actually given it that much focus, have we?
Yeah, we've never really had a Midnight Club episode. We've never talked about the games in context with anything else, and that's honestly a big oversight on our part, because these are, I think, Need for Speed gets a lot of attention. Back in the day, you'd have your Juice, your Street Racing Syndicate, or whatever, but I think Midnight Club actually has aged to be maybe the most complete open world street racer. And it's funny because, I think part of that's because there are just less games in the series and most of them are good, so they never really put a foot wrong. But I think it's also because, these games took a really interesting approach, and there's a distinct feel to them that I just don't get when I play, say, Need for Speed Most Wanted. As good as, I like the original Most Wanted a lot, and there's some other good games from that era, but there's something different about the way that Rockstar San Diego, or Angel Studios as they were known before, approached open world street racing, and so I think it's definitely overdue that we give these games some attention.
Yeah, absolutely, and glad you referenced that point about Rockstar, to be honest, because that's something when I was thinking about what makes Midnight Club different, I guess, from other racing series and such, as that maybe not so much prevalent these days, you could argue, with how Rockstar approach game development and such, but they are known for being a range of studios who basically take all the time they need to build the games that they want to build. So it's different from Need for Speed in the sense that that's like one of the linchpins of EA's roster, and then for a while there was a necessity to get that out every single year, especially at the height of street racing. You obviously have the flagship exclusive games that pretty much get an unlimited budget, and that kind of facilitates the great games that they end up being. But Rockstar's Midnight Club series sits in this weird kind of area of a racing game that was never really needed, but Rockstar wanted, and Angel Studios wanted to make a game of that type. And it's interesting because the way it depicts street racing and the way that it actually kind of makes the gameplay look around that, it was definitely something a bit more unique than other kind of games within the genre had been doing, and maybe not so much on the actual focus on the thing it's trying to replicate, but more around the gameplay elements and how they tie that into the series. Because one of the things I got from revisiting this series, just generally speaking, was a positive shock about how they keep the racing interesting and fresh throughout the game. The way that, and we'll get into specifics of course about the games that we played soon, but the way that it's actually able to kind of progress gameplay alongside career progression and stuff was really interesting, because it wasn't just, here is a drift mode, here is a drag racing mode. It's genuinely like building up the player as a street racer by introducing more gimmicks is probably a bad way of putting it, but introducing new elements to the races that actually keep them fresh and exciting. Because one thing I seem to realise throughout the games was that at the time when I started to feel it got repetitive, at that exact moment there was a new element to racing introduced, and the way it's drip fed throughout the games was something that maybe 1 was a bit more straightforward, but from 2 onwards they were definitely really good at trying to keep the player engaged and trying to keep people involved, and that came from the mental difficulty as well as the actual gameplay elements itself.
Yeah, I think with these games, it's interesting. You look at it from a standpoint of, how many modes or play styles are in the game. And I never really thought about it until playing these games now, and you especially bringing it up, Brent. But they don't go for a lot of different play styles, really. It's usually just a race, and the checkpoints might be ordered or unordered. But I've been playing, especially I put more time into Midnight Club 2, and we played Midnight Club 2 in LA to really focus on. But like those games don't really, in the way of like drift modes or anything like that. Like the games have a presence when it comes to like cops and pursuits, but it's not like a Need for Speed thing where like the whole game revolves around it. And as fun as those are in Need for Speed, yeah, I just think it's interesting that like they're pretty straightforward games with pretty straightforward situations that you get yourself into, but there's always a little tweak or something. Like in Midnight Club 2, all of a sudden you're in a bike race, like a biker gang shows up, and now you have to race these people, and it's like, okay, these are in the game now, and I think the next race you get on the bike, and Gina's telling you, like, this is how you ride one. They'll usually take those moments to introduce things like all the sort of weird, like, bullet time features, or like in Midnight Club LA, there's that thing you can do, the roar, that just like just blasts like a wipeout shockwave like throughout the road in front of you. And these little things sound insignificant, but they actually are typically introduced in tandem with a race in which you really need to master that or understand that mechanic. So it does keep the racing exciting. And I think the other way in which they contribute this sense of variety is it's weird because I wouldn't say these are massively narrative driven games, but there are always characters, and I don't know if it's a focus on story. I think it's more of a focus on character. But like, if we want to get into it, like Midnight Club 2, and we didn't really spend time with the first one, and that honestly is like a shortcoming on my part. Like I really want to just try that first game. I know it's very simple and it was a PS2 launch title, but yeah, we kind of went just straight for MC2. And I played this game when it came out and I loved it, but I was a kid. And going back to it now, the characters are the things that stand out, which is something that I would like never say about any other racing game. And it's funny because like they are very much stereotypes, but they're very colorful stereotypes. They're very animated. They're caricatures of people, and I love them. Like, it's so weird, but I think what they did with like the interludes in Midnight Club 2, when you're going from like rival to rival, you never spend so long with a rival that you get tired of them. Yeah. They usually, like, when they're talking to you, it never lasts more than like 20 seconds. They say something, they're in your ear during the race. You'll maybe race against them 2 more times, and that's it. You're gone. You're on to the next person. And like, that's a way to introduce a bit of flavor and like context and world building in the game without beating you over the head with it. And yeah, I never want to skip the cutscenes in Midnight Club 2 because they're just funny. Like, they're funny. The voice acting is like better than like anything you would have gotten at the time from any other game. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a very, Midnight Club 2 really does not have that much content, but it's a very charming game in spite of that.
Yeah, I think like the way that it uses that time so well, absolutely like something to experience up nicely, because from a gameplay point of view as well, they don't waste too much time with the fact that it's an open world game, which is something very unique given that when Need for Speed moved to an open world series, for example, they definitely tried to make it so that you had to kind of embrace that open world mentality, whereas for me, like Midnight Club 2's open worlds just feel like hub areas for you to find the races and get them kicked off. Almost, and this is a weird comparison, but similar to like Racing Lagoon in that sense, where you're just kind of using that cityscape to get to the races and find the events, that sort of thing, for the most part. But on the characters piece, I totally agree. I think like the ways in which they're able to portray what each character's kind of personality is, or what their trait is, through a combination of like the usual kind of shit talk they'll say to the player, the thinking aloud type things, so you can hear their inner thoughts. Yeah. And then like the ultimate closure scene of when you beat them. I wrote a tweet about this the other day, but it's like every character in Midnight Club manages to be a wank but also pretty sound as well. It's like there's this weird duality of man thing going on with every single character, where you think, oh, this guy's just going to be a dick then in these like 40 seconds of cutscenes, but somehow they've got that depth of like, you see the way some of them come around to you when you beat them, you see the way some of them are happy they've been beaten in some cases. Savo especially in the late game. It's interesting. It's basically like you would think that of any type of game, a racing game would not be able to cram that much character in such little screen time, because for me as well, it's like, I don't want to keep making comparisons to Need for Speed, right, but it's the closest proximity to these games.
They're inevitable,
and
you know.
Yeah, exactly. And like Need for Speed's whole gambit was like this underbelly of corrupt individuals, and everybody hates you and everybody's out to get you. Whereas like in Midnight Club, it's like it's for the love of the racing almost. You feel like everybody's just like embracing that underground racing atmosphere, which is more akin to like the start of something like Fast and Furious, when you meet the family and all that type of stuff. That's the kind of vibes I get from it. And I think that's why it's such a fun experience, because you never feel like things are getting too dragged down with the story or anything, but you're meeting all these fun individuals as well.
This is gonna sound stupid, because like at the end of the day, these are all video games, and these are all very fictional depictions of street racing. But it is a world that, you know, obviously neither of us are intimately familiar with. But there was something that always felt more authentic about Midnight Club to me than Need for Speed. Need for Speed, whether it was Underground, Most Wanted, Carbon, it always felt like it was playing to whatever the mainstream popular culture representation of racing was in the day. It was very easy for EA to go get all those like top 40 artists or whatever, usually those who were like already broken and everybody knew about, and then just like put them on the EA track soundtrack. And like they're good soundtracks and stuff, and like I love Most Wanted, but like they never really felt like they were breaking new ground. Whereas I look at Midnight Club, and I would actually say that for me, it's a level of authenticity with like the style of what they're trying to go for and the branding of everything, and especially the music, that it's not on the level of like a Wipeout 2097, but it almost feels like it, you know, not in the visual sense, obviously, but like, it's just like an understanding of sort of what's cool about street racing and like what felt sort of groundbreaking. Like the soundtracks in like 3 and LA would get a lot more, you know, they were huge soundtracks and they're both very good, but like I remember in LA they had like the Justice remix of Electric Feel by MGMT and like a Block Party song and stuff like that. And I think in 3 they had Jimmy Eat World. Good songs, but you know, lots of stuff you have heard on the radio. Or would have been popular at that time. Whereas like Midnight Club 2 soundtrack is such an awesome it's just like hit after hit in terms of like sleepers, like DJs and acts and stuff that I've never heard of before, songs that like revisiting this game, because I revisited it also a little bit last year and made my way through a long way until my computer basically shit the bed and I lost my save. But I'm just like taken aback by the quality of the soundtrack in this game, and the way that they use music too is very interesting, because the soundtrack is enormous, but they only summon certain songs upon interactions with certain racers. There is like a short looped version of a song that will always play when you're like following a racer to the start of a race. And there are songs that are tied to the 3 cities in the game. Yeah. So it's actually a large soundtrack, but you don't realize that until you get to the end. And it's fantastic. Like there's just something about the music component of this game that I feel like maybe gets overlooked. And like as I was playing it, I was thinking like this just feels like a more rich, like this just feels cool. Like it just feels cool to be playing this game.
I think that use of music as well, it's even more impressive that it's all licensed given the very limited and purposeful use of the music as well, because your average kind of race series with a driver takes, say, 6 to 8 minutes if you're doing it first time, right? Yeah. So you think of how many drivers there are in the game, and each of them have their own specific themes and the specific loops and that sort of thing that play at certain events, and it's a very purposeful take on the soundtrack to directly tie it to the characters and stuff, and it's one that is not a necessity by any means, because you can either go down the route of having like an original soundtrack and just, you know, putting together something that suits the character they're going for, or you just go down the route of having an EA tracks type approach of, there's like 6 different songs that plays in this track, or 4 that play on this track, but they're still mixing and matching it together. but the way that they then tie it to the cities as well, I think that kind of that is part of the cool factor we're talking about in this game, where it takes itself serious in a way that never feels like it's trying too hard. And that's why it creates this type of atmosphere that, like you were saying earlier, Adam, even when I was younger, like, there was just something about Midnight Club specifically, you were like, that this game, like, it's got
this
something
game
about
gets
it. Yeah, exactly, that's it, 100%. And I don't want to kind of, once again, just credit Rockstar as a whole for the way Midnight Club turned out, but like, I feel as if that is just so indicative of how Rockstar managed to rise in popularity, because they were always so great with everything they put out, including even their fucking table tennis game. Like, they were so good at just like understanding that they felt as if they were in full control of what they wanted to make, and that mantra really let see it through GTA and made it an absolute global mega hit. For the Midnight Club games we got, they were all very distinct and very nice in terms of being different for each game, but also still having that cool theme together. And you could argue, like, post 2, perhaps things got a bit more standard in the series, but in terms of like 2 itself, you've got they obviously spent the money on the soundtrack side of things, and then for the licensed cars and everything, they decided not to go down that route, which means that they have that kind of creative freedom. And the thing is, the cars are basically just like these kind of debadged versions. They're rip-offs at the end of the day. But like, unlike other games where you often feel that that's a downside, like, there's just something about the mystique of Midnight Club that's added by the fact that these are all debadged versions of these cars. It almost if you're into a lower side of things or anything, like, it kind of adds to that mythos that this is a different universe, and it's like street racing is the main cool thing everybody does, and it's not like, you never feel as if any part of this game's creative process was dictated by the likes of licensing or worried that kids might go to street race after playing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's very much a guise in this game where it's like, if you try and hit a pedestrian, you'll hit the pedestrian, and if you try and yeah, exactly. If you try and land this jump slightly wrong, then you will wreck your car. But do you know what I mean? There's a very kind of grounded nature to everything about it that just means that those cool elements just blend perfectly with the rest of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, this game, what was the rating on this game? I need to check, like, the ESRB,
the PEGI stuff. Great question.
I don't know if I can find it, but as you look for it, yeah, it's just interesting how I think this game really, like, piggybacked, for better or worse, off of sort of Rockstar's perception at the time.
Yeah.
Coming off of GTA 3, and I don't know if this I think came after Vice City, but you know, you have this game come out that is such a hit, obviously, for Rockstar, really kind of brands them as, like, you know, the future of gaming, the future, like, in a way that's like, you know, this is, although there were obviously lots of very juvenile aspects of GTA 3's portrayal of the world, there were also some, like, adult themes, obviously, that were not explored previously, and this was kind of Rockstar sort of benefiting from that perception. And then when they go to make a racing game, the racing game also feels kind of more adult and sort of more grown up and less like it's just trying to do what everyone else is doing. And whether that was, like, actively sort of an influence on Midnight Club's development, or whether it was just something that we all out there in the market were like, yes, these games are cool, I don't know if I could really say. But yeah, it kind of blew me away. I did not remember that you could just run over pedestrians in this game. And I think it's like it's pretty much a T rating across the board. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I'd had a look. T14, 16, and a 12 in Germany.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Because, like, it's... Yeah, just the fact that you can run over pedestrians alone, I think, is enough to get you, like, an M these days.
Yeah.
But this was at a time where Rockstar was, like, just skirting that line. And I think that they were maybe able to the extent anybody was paying attention to Midnight Club, you know, in the shadow of the juggernaut that was GTA, they could probably point to, like, see, we make normal games too, without all the bad words and the sex and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I did actually get quite a shock when I hit a pedestrian for the first time upon revisiting the game, because I'd somehow forgotten that that was part of it. So it's just nowadays, it's just expected that every pedestrian manages to finesse cars in any game now, pretty much, and even the sheep in Forza Horizon. It was just a bit of a surprise, and I think it is that adult representation of street racing, I guess, that it just feels a lot more accurate than Need for Speed's kind of hammy portrayal that is obviously based on market trends and that sort of thing. But Midnight Club 2, it's an underground racing game. It's something that was behind the juggernaut, which is GTA, like you're saying. But I think in general, like, I remember when Midnight Club 2 first came about, it was still very much it wasn't insanely popular. It was more of somebody you knew had it, or like you had a chance to play a demo or something, and you found out about it, and then when everybody played it, they thought it was fantastic. But I really think it wasn't until 3 that it really shot into the kind of pantheon of racing greatness from the mainstream public point of view. But like 2 just has that perfect balance for me of it's almost like the Burnout discussion in a way, where like by Burnout 2 you felt as if they got that stride, they knew what they wanted to push forward, and then they took it to the next level. Midnight Club 2 feels like that, but also I would have been happy if it stayed at this level. Like, it didn't really have to take that next step of branching out in a way that made it more kind of mainstream appeal. I think this game, and you see the term thrown about all the time, but the YouTube comments, 3,000 upvotes for something like Dark Souls of arcade racing games, and it is, and I think like outside of the difficulty piece, I think like that basically just means that it's very much a game that has its own set of rules, and it's not afraid to conform to those in an absolute way, and I think that's what makes the gameplay so fun.
Yeah, it's important too to talk about just like, you know, we've kind of been speaking to the mythos of this game and kind of the way it makes us feel as we play it, but like sort of the tangible aspects of how it gets there. I came across an interview from a level designer at Rockstar San Diego who worked on this game, and it basically comes down to, and I mean, I think I can just quote the first paragraph here. It's not that long, but I think it sums up one of the reasons why this game works. It's from Mark Fredrickson, and he said that the philosophy of building a city is to make it fun first. These days, a lot of companies are stuck on creating replicas of real cities, focusing on insignificant details that add nothing to the gameplay. We tried this years ago and quickly learned it was not fun. As a result, we are more concerned with making a fun race rather than with which building is on. Okay, making a fun race instead of what building is on what corner. At 180 miles per hour, it's all a blur anyway. The cities in Midnight Club 2 are built for racing. And yeah, I mean, these cities are, you will see aspects, you know, there is the Eiffel Tower in Paris, but you're also racing on rooftops. Like, they are very much fictional, very much set up in the way that the city in, say, like, you know, Paradise City and Burnout is, you know. There are many opportunities for you to go vertical as well as horizontal. And there are just there's some like ramps and stuff in this game, like in LA, like you're on the freeway and there's always, and you know exactly where it's going to be. There's always going to be a truck on the edge of the highway, like a construction vehicle that just has its ramp upturned, and you go off of it and you're in the air for like 5 seconds. It's crazy. And just the fact that the maps, you know, the environments aren't that big, but they have more of a sense of scale when you can do things like that. And between that and the whole aspect of, you know, the way that Midnight Club does its races, where they're not strictly linear, they're checkpoint to checkpoint, but you can figure out how you get there. That's something that, like, obviously GTA does now and has done forever with its racing, but lots of racing games don't do that. And I feel like Midnight Club has never really gotten enough respect for inventing that style of, you know, open world racing where it rewards knowledge of the city. There's a little bit of that in like Burnout Paradise, but I think Midnight Club cities are actually so complex with the shortcuts and stuff like that that like there are times where like you're not really sure what the fastest route would be, but you know, once you've got it, especially in like an unordered race where you could literally go to any checkpoint at any time, it really rewards that sense of, you know, I've been paying attention and I know the city like the back of my hand, and it makes you feel like you're more part of the world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and the way that the races are structured as well, it's in the first few races that you'll do in any given city, the checkpoints will always be placed very close to potential shortcuts and stuff. And then when you get into the later races, it isolates the checkpoints further away from those shortcuts and stuff. But the idea is that you remember those shortcuts and can actually use it to your advantage. So the way that the actual races themselves are structured with the checkpoints is great, because it tries to encourage that learning. If, like you're saying, you're paying attention. You're not going to have Moses over the phone telling you, hey, take the shortcut next right, or something like that. Like you're not going to get that, but what you will understand if you're actually watching what's happening is that the game purposely tries to guide you towards routes where there are shortcuts, so that when you get to those later races, those difficult champion battles and stuff, you do know the city by that point. And the unordered race piece, for me, that is like prime Midnight Club. This is what this game is about. Side of things, it's giving you that full freedom of actually pursuing the route that you think works best. And it must have been very difficult at the time to justify having that type of race type in the game, because, being quite frank, there will be players who just simply cannot win at those type of races.
I was one of them when I was a kid and I played this game for the first time. It was a lot like, do you remember Yoshi's Island, or not Yoshi's Island, but the Yoshi circuit on Mario Kart 64? Yeah. Where the map is just like, I don't know, and you just have to figure it out. Like, I was so confused with the unordered races when I was a kid playing this game for the first time.
Yeah, it's a big commitment to purposely throw that type of race in when it's just something that hasn't really been done elsewhere that much, to be honest. I think the kind of more player-friendly version of that is simply, here is the finish line, get to it. And that sounds more grandiose and complex, but it actually removes the part that makes it interesting for me, where if you just got to get a certain point on the map, then you may have to find the best route, but ultimately, as long as you find the straight lines, as long as you find the highways, you'll be fine.
Sure, yeah.
But when you have to hit every checkpoint, it makes it so much harder, because you don't have a dedicated route. If you think about the shortcuts element we're talking about, you're having to use your brain constantly to work out, should I take this checkpoint, or will it make it difficult for me? It's a shortcut, sorry, or will it make it difficult for me? Right. It's just like, it's a totally different type of gameplay style, and the game really leans into it in the later races for obvious reasons. And it makes it that bit more exciting and fun to play, because I don't know if it's intentional, I don't know if it's just the AI not being that evolved, but like, even with the AI, sometimes if you restart a race a few times, some of them just fucking get lost and get stuck in traffic, and I don't know what's going on, but I hope it's intentional, because it does add to the kind of the difficulty sometimes if they're absolutely on it, but then other times you get a bit lucky with a bit of traffic in the right place, and the AI don't just bounce off these traffic and keep going, like, they fucking get clattered, man.
This is a very fair game, because the AI can like grief the hell out of you, but you can dish it right back. One of my favorite / most annoying things to do to myself when I play Midnight Club 2 is when you're driving to a race and you have to follow the other, your rival, and they're not ever going very quickly. So that gives you a lot of opportunities to just destroy them. But what will usually happen is if you turn them around or flip them over, they will get lost. So now what you've just done is like, because they're not very smart. So now what you've just done is, now it's going to take you like, 4 minutes to start this race that should have been like a 30-second thing. It does feel like an old game in that way. It's not massively sophisticated, but again, I think that's kind of part of its charm. It's weird having a game like this where the open world isn't, as you were saying, it's weirdly, it is like a Racing Lagoon thing, because the open world is not really something like, if you want to just like roam for the hell of it, you can, but like the open world is really taken advantage of in the races. It's not something like a Most Wanted type situation where you're going to just free roam to get into a pursuit and drive around the city aimlessly, but also while you have this objective on your mind. It's more like, yeah, the city's there if you want to explore, but you'll get all the exploration you want done in the actual racing. And I think that's kind of cool. It's just a different approach. It's probably an older approach. Almost reminds me of a game like Hot Pursuit 2010, where like I forget that game has an open world because all of the races are point to point, and like I think you kind of have to go out of your way to like go into the map and free roam if you want. Most of the races are just selected from a checklist. So I don't know. I like these different approaches to open worlds because today everything's pretty figured out. It's pretty buttoned up, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is a difference, I suppose, even if talking a bit further towards LA, where like LA, when it came out, had that weird feel of a GTA game with the GTA-ness kind of stripped away purely because at that point open world design was so well regulated in terms of here's how it should be structured, here's the perfect way to set up an open world map, whereas you really do feel with Midnight Club 2 very little referential games to look at and frame an open world around. The approach that Angel took was to actually try and build a world that was suited, like the quote say, that suited for the racing first and foremost, and the kind of backdrop is just an element of that, and I think that's why it makes a nice back of the box quote to say that it's free like cities, like as free open world cities, but in reality the most impressive part of it is that it's basically free landscapes of interweaved racetracks that can host many different types of event and have like you have fun through that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I highly doubt many people get enjoyment out of this game just cruising the city, because it just feels more like the means to an end, and it works a lot better to have that type of system of flashing your lights and starting a race, following a car, starting a race, than doing it all through menus, because it would take away from that feel and atmosphere element I'm talking about. So it's for me, it's like that perfect balance of a hub world and an open world. It's doing what its job is supposed to be, and there's enough to do in it that it never feels like any of the cities overstay their welcome either.
Yeah. And you know, we're talking about a game where it still feels, you know, it's kind of weird because this game was definitely in development concurrently with your GTA 3 or GTA Vice City probably. And so it doesn't feel like it's really it's coming from a place of like Rockstar now has a massive budget. Like it still feels kind of, although the cities were impressive for their time in terms of scope, like you can't customize vehicles. Graphically, technologically, the game was nothing special. I mean, I remember at the time I thought it was kind of ugly. It's okay for what it is. It's definitely a step up from the first game. Yeah. But like it feels kind of quaint, and I think for me, this is actually, you know, we're talking about Burnout 2 episodes ago, and I think the Burnout 2 comparison is apt, only in this case, I think the more I play Midnight Club 2, the more I actually kind of prefer it to, you know, 3 was always my favorite, and that's a great game, but I feel like with Midnight Club 3, I could get that experience anywhere else. Yeah. And Midnight Club 2 is totally its own thing. And it gets there without customization, without the hallmarks that you would expect from, you know, other racing games, without, you know, we have a drift mode, and then we have like a time trial mode, and then we have this or that, you know, it's just like, you don't really know what's going to happen race to race other than you're going to end up in some crazy situation, some wild part of the city. You know, the AI is going to take a stupid route and something hilarious is going to happen. And it's just, I feel like it's one of those things where like they don't tell you a whole lot, and it actually works in the game's favor. Yeah. And, you know, maybe that reflects on like modern game design, because then as we look at like LA, you know, we're talking about a game that I still enjoy very much. I think it's a really fun game. It feels very alive, but it feels more like everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's maybe indicative of the time period that Midnight Club 2 came out, that it's just at that point it felt as if there wasn't there isn't a standard racing game driving model. I don't want to imply that's the case, but there's definitely like certain kind of car behaviours now that are pretty standard across the genre. But like Midnight Club 2 kind of almost frames its physics around the gameplay, much like a real arcade racer should do. So it's not about trying to appeal to everybody. It's not about trying to provide an experience that everybody can get enjoyment out of. Even when you look at like as I often do, I look at the reviews of this game that first came out. You had like the 9s and 10s, then you get Edge giving it like a 5. Because they felt that the handling was too twitchy and the game's too vague to capture players and that sort of thing. And if that doesn't show that the squares didn't get this game, then I don't know what does.
I don't know how I ended up with this game as a kid, because I was very opinionated about the kinds of games, racing games I was playing. Because I was like a little, piece of shit, but I didn't like, I was upset when Need for Speed went, tuner. I was upset when the underground games happened. This is not like Midnight Club was not something that I would have gone out of my way to play, because it didn't have licensed cars, because it, didn't have the most accurate the best graphics and the most accurate depiction or whatever. It just like as like a car nerd, even at a young age, just wasn't my thing, and yet I ended up playing the game and I was surprised how much I loved it. And I was regularly like confused by it. I didn't understand how to win, and I don't think I ever beat the game because I just I just got to a point. Yeah, it gets and it starts out pretty easy, but the difficulty ramps up in a way where you're just like, I don't know, like I almost don't know how we got here. And but it's it's a different kind of experience, and some background too to us going back and playing this game. Bren, you were saying that you checked it out on PC and PS2, which is very cool.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I played the game originally on PS2. I don't know I have my PS2 copy. I must have sold it or something. It's because it's gone. But Rockstar out of nowhere, and then I remember we were talking about this in Timex and Discord last summer, it seems like they accidentally relisted Midnight Club 2 on Steam, and it was like $10, and I bought it, and they took it down in like 2 hours, and I bought it, and I'm so happy I have it now, because like I'm playing Midnight Club 2, I don't know, at like, at 1440p, which in of itself, like trying to get this game, like to figure out how to get like a modern resolution, and especially the controller pad support is like it's heinous. It's like, because this game came out in 2003, but once you figure that stuff out, you're playing at like 120 frames per second. Like it's a blast. It's like it's weird, but it works, and it's like it's a PC port on the modern PC, which in of itself is kind of a weird experience.
Yeah, I think that's what blew my mind about the PC version. That the fact that we were able to buy it in the first place when that error happened, but then also like how, aside from trying to up the resolution and stuff, just how like perfectly it worked. Like it's PC gaming often confuses me in that way, where you get games built for hardware that's supposed to run on it and it doesn't run on it, and then you get games like this that were made and put out of support long ago that work absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, I think it was probably part of Rockstar. They put the game on Steam, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago or something like that. Yeah. And I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming that like, the certification for Steam requires lots of quality of life things that like a standard, Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed is not going to have, obviously. So, that makes it run pretty reliably on anything. The hard part is getting the controller support figured out, but somebody actually on the Steam has those community pages for every game, and somebody listed a couple different controller methods, and you basically just download the scripts, and I think you put a file in the folder, and you start up the game and it works. So that's probably the best way to go about it, but I don't know. I'm not a PC gaming expert, even though I play some games on PC, and Rockstar has taken the game down, so I don't think there's like, you can get it through official means, but I'm sure there's another way you can get it.
Please don't buy a key from a reseller though, because they're still trying to get like $2,000 and stuff.
Oh God!
Keys, so
I didn't realize.
Don't do that. Yeah. I'm sure you'll find other ways. Yeah. Midnight Club 2. It's interesting to me because I feel as if when I was younger, it was definitely free, and it was Dub Edition and Dub Edition Remix that really got me into loving Midnight Club for the reasons that we talked about earlier. That was the game that started to embrace the kind of mainstream culture of what street racing was perceived as, and what made it cool. Naturally, being like a young kid and stuff, you gravitate towards that type of experience, and I was scared off from 2 being incredibly difficult. Still tried to play it, but not that great at it. And I think the thing about street racing games in general is that a lot of people derive enjoyment simply from the customization element and building your cars and that sort of thing. So like Dub Edition having all those features makes it immediately more accessible to everybody, and
right.
It's as if the atmosphere in Free and Remix was still really good. It's just that I think 2 is the peak of Rockstar not really giving a shit about appealing to that kind of what is expected from a racing game. Definitely. 3 onwards was them realising that they're actually really good at this, and they can put together a street racing game that does the kind of the genre justice. And that's why I wish I played a bit more of 1 as well, but it's very much a case of, because like you say, Adam, it was a launch title, and it obviously has different cities and stuff. I believe it's got London, New York,
I think New York and London. I know for a fact. I can't remember. I'm assuming there's.
I think it was Singapore or somewhere in China, perhaps, maybe for the first one. For some reason, oh wait, I might be thinking of that like weird tribute that McLaren did for the Singapore Grand Prix. Have you ever seen that graphic at all, Adam?
Oh right, yeah, I do remember seeing that.
So maybe that's kind of warping my mind, but I'm pretty sure that there's Free in that as well. But I figured it would just be good to play 2 since it was a lot more readily accessible. That sort of thing I already had 2 on the PS2 as well.
It's only London and New York.
Okay. So 2 cities.
So there you go.
Yeah, so probably go back and revisit that now after having such a good experience with 2. But
it looks so simple, and it's funny when you look. I just always laugh at, aside from like Ridge Racer 5, you look at PS2 launch titles and you're like, this is what killed Sega as a company. Like, people were so taken by the marketing. I mean, these games look like they're a generation behind the Dreamcast. And of course, in time, PS2 development, give it like 2 years, and it was starting to blow the Dreamcast out of the water. But like they were not there out of the gate. And like Midnight Club 1 it visually at least has not aged very well. But like a Burnout type thing, it's how they got here. And so we talked a lot about 2, but I'm kind of happy we did, because it's a surprisingly, enjoyable, charming game, and I think that you should definitely go seek it out if you haven't played it, or if you haven't played it in a long time, in my case. But Midnight Club LA, I went back to this one, and I remember when this game was new, I played it, and I liked it, but I never had... and I beat it, but I never had any compulsion to go back to it. I feel like I almost was like unfair towards it. There was never anything I could put my finger on I didn't like about the game. Yeah. But now going back to it, I think first off, it feels so modern. Like, and maybe that's because Rockstar has been using the same engine for like the last 14 years. But like it looks really good. Like, I was playing it on the 360, and this was one of the first applications, I imagine, of the Rage engine. You would have had GTA 4 before this, but this would have been the next thing. I think Red Dead Redemption followed this game. And it has aged very well. What gets me is like, it's a pretty game. Especially like the sunsets, and you'll see like the way that the road surface will reflect, and like I've been to LA, I've been through LA very briefly, but like when you go there, the way that like they have like the concrete roads and stuff, and the surfaces are all a little bit wonky. I think a lot about how pavement is different in like New York compared to like Los Angeles, but they capture like the weird like mismatch of surfaces and the way that the sun kind of, you know, bounces off with the specular highlights and stuff. And it just feels modern and very full. There are tons of people, of pedestrians on the road. Unlike in Midnight Club 2, you can't hit them. They will run out of your way, but they're, you know, these cities feel very rich and alive, and lots of cars on the road too. I don't, you know, aside from maybe like one of the Burnout games, and I don't even know if I would put Burnout Paradise in this conversation. I feel like this game has like the most like NPC cars on the road that you have to like avoid or dodge of like any game I've ever played. It makes the racing a real challenge. And I think experiencing all of this and the level of detail they were able to push out of these systems, and then going and playing a game like, say, you know, again, Need for Speed, Carbon, or something like that, you know, that era of Need for Speed feels like, it definitely feels like it comes from a different time in gaming. But I feel like Midnight Club LA actually feels as, you know, basically as fresh today as it did when it came out. And I feel like if you remastered this game, you know, it would have aged perfectly. This game, to me, I know Rockstar likes to re-release a lot of stuff, and I know they probably won't because of the car licenses, but like, this would be such a great game if they could remaster it in a way to make it feel a little bit more fresh, because like, there is a lot here. And it just feels more alive than a lot of open world racing games do, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point about the Need for Speed comparative at the time, because the means in which I came about Midnight Club LA tie into that nicely. I actually, and on my birthday, I went to Blockbuster and I picked up for purchase Need for Speed Undercover. I was stuck at the shelves, and I was like, what game do I pick up? Midnight Club LA or Need for Speed Undercover? And for whatever reason, I went for Need for Speed Undercover. I had seen footage of it, I had read reviews and stuff, but like, I'm a bit of a black box fanboy, as you know, when it comes to the Need for Speed games, and I thought I'd give it the benefit of the doubt. And it's funny because I got the game home, and I played the first race, and I just remember that fucking barren city, like, just absolute desolate. Like, it was like something out of Fallout, just like no cars on the road whatsoever.
Right, yeah.
That same fucking physics engine, the sun at the worst point of the day for racing possible all the time. That fucking, like, sunset always in your eyes. And I remember I did the first race, and I just felt that, ugh, I fucking hate the physics of that game so much. I remember feeling the physics of that game, finishing the race, getting the one trophy that pops up, it says like welcome to Angel City, or whatever the fuck it's called. And I just took the game out. I took the bus back to the Blockbuster 25 minutes away on the same day with my receipt, and handed it back, got a refund, and bought Midnight Club LA instead. Like, I've never done that with any game before. I very rarely refund anything, never mind take a 25-minute bus to actually take it back and stuff on my birthday. Yeah. But it was just like, I remember thinking how fucking disappointing that was. And then I picked up Midnight Club LA, and it's like the kind of usual display cases they have out, not the actual games. And they come from behind the counter and hand me the Midnight Club LA box. And the reason I point this out is because at one point Rockstar was really good at making their games feel like events. Do you know that way? Like, you felt as if you bought something really cool. And I seen that embossed cover with like the shiny material and stuff with the
Mustang and
the Mustang on the front, Midnight Club LA embossed standing out, the cool colours. Heavy fucking box, man, because of that map inside.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, right, even at that moment, I was like, this is the one. This is substantial. Right. This is what I should have got. And then, before I'd even played the game, I already felt as if I'd made the right call, because it just like that's Rockstar for you at that time period. And the game itself, like you're saying, Adam, I revisited it actually not for the purposes of the pod, just over lockdown when I wanted games to play, and it's available on Xbox, of course, backwards compatibility.
Nice.
I was playing it on the Series X, and what a night I had, man. Like, I just fucking bottle of Jack Daniels, some Pepsi Max to mix it with, and just played Midnight Club for like 7 hours straight. And it's funny because when it comes to revisiting older games, I'll be honest, I do that kind of thing where I'll play an hour or two, I fall away, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it never quite captures you the same way it does. But there was just something so like cathartic about that experience of revisiting Midnight Club LA, and it felt the exact same as it did then. Hitting on the points you've said, it feels like such an alive world for a racing game that you don't really see that often. Even Forza Horizon is arguably better at, like, the whole Horizon Festival thing still feels oddly desolate. Like even in later games,
well,
it doesn't
you
feel
have all of
legitimate.
the crowds. All of the crowds are in a very self-contained area that's cordoned off, and then you never see another human being for the rest of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Because like that's why like that game always makes me laugh when it's like the Halo events and stuff, and it just looks so strange and like odd that it never really comes off as something cool because of that. It's like never feels like a real world. Whereas in LA, obviously you have the actual story and stuff, which is cool, and like kind of tying in with the GTA type stuff. But just outside of that, like you were saying, a lot of traffic on the roads that adjust depending on the time of day. There's dynamic weather in there. There is a full 24-hour cycle. The traffic
so
itself is
technically
absolutely.
It's so impressive. I mean, you have especially you played Need for Speed Undercover. And EA was always averse to like interior reviews. They never put, I mean, even Need for Speed Heat didn't have one. And here you have not only a full interior reviews, you can change the steering wheel and the seats in the car.
Yeah.
You can change the color of the upholstery to like any color you want. Like
neons
there's some of these things,
as well.
neons, the airbags and stuff for the hydraulics for the car. And yeah, the customization, it's funny talking about 2, because customization was a huge focus of 3, and they did a great job on it. And then they just built on that with LA. LA doesn't have a lot of cars, the car roster, and I feel like that's maybe the one thing against is the car roster is kind of weak, especially because 3 had like everything. But you can do a lot with those cars. And it's just such a rich game. I think comparing 2 and LA is interesting because 2 feels like this like undiscovered, seedy, secretly cool thing before it broke. It feels like you're going to like, a club that like no one's heard about before, but is like right on the brink of exploding. Whereas like Midnight Club LA to me feels like a block party. It's just like everything all the time, loud, just like, it takes itself, again, that perfect Rockstar balance of like, we know what we're about, we take ourselves seriously, but we're not going to beat you over the head with it. We're not going to turn you off with it. And it's just fun. It's just a fun game. And I don't know why, when I played it, I was like, that was all right. Because I think what it is the further away that we get from games like this, because there was a point where a game like this was coming out every year. And until Need for Speed Heat, that basically stopped. And like I played Heat and I liked it a lot, but if I'm honest, was that because of the nostalgia factor, or was that because it was actually a great game? It was good. But yeah, Midnight Club LA I think proves that like, God, if Rockstar could ever make anything other than GTA, they would be able to hit another one of these out of the park. And I actually completely forgot, because I was bringing up a remaster, but even that's not really necessary because it's on Series X and Series S. I totally forgot about
weird.
That.
Like it's so strange that like with the licenses they bought just that long that they're still active, or is it like are they actively renewing it? Like, if I remember right, actually, only arrived for sale very close in proximity to the whole Midnight Club 2 thing on Steam, if I remember right, because it seemed like for a month there was that weird shit going on with the Midnight Club license, the IP get renewed, that happened with 2.
Happened recently, yep.
And then LA was available for sale on the store once it got added to the backwards compatibility side of things, so yeah, I have no idea why it's for sale, but it's absolutely worth adding to the library. It's like £12 for the complete edition now, which is the best way to experience the game.
You'll get the South Central, which adds like a whole chunk onto the map. Yeah, I want to see if it's on Steam, because I don't remember if it is.
I don't know either. Actually, it's a good point.
I'm just gonna have a quick a quick look. No, I don't think it is. Yeah, so I mean, if you have an Xbox, that's one of those reasons why like I wish I had an Xbox, man, because like I have the PS5. Sony doesn't give a shit about backwards compatibility, so and when they do, they they just give you PAL versions of games. So
it's one of the best things about the Xbox is this backwards compatibility element, because it pays a surprising amount of homage to the racing genre, which, you know what, fair play. There's like Midnight Club, there's Split Second, there's what's the other kind of, well, Driver, San Francisco, there's Midnight Club, do you know what I mean? Like, there's everything aside from Blur really on the whole side of like that genre, that era that everybody considers any of these games underrated. It's like, it's just interchangeable the way people want to talk about that era specifically. But the scary thing about Midnight Club, and it almost works against it in some ways for discussions like this where we wax lyrical about what Midnight Club 2 did, Midnight Club LA still does. Like the elements that it has great are parts that make it easier to downplay, I suppose, just how impressive it was they'd done that at a time. Because even if you think about it from a multiplayer point of view, Midnight Club LA was one of the first games to really nail that open world feel for multiplayer that made it more about the social experience as opposed to racing. There was the Rockstar game Social Club integration in there and stuff as well, and there was that kind of additional element to the game. And there's a lot to do in the game as well, like at any given point, but unlike 2's type of open world, Midnight Club LA's world is one which is so meticulously detailed and put together that it is actually enjoyable just to take in. And obviously that comes at the cost, you could argue, of as fun racing kind of layouts for the point-to-point races and stuff. It's still a fun game to race at, fun city to race in. But obviously because they've went down that more accuracy-driven route for LA, it definitely gives it that more standard open-world racing game feel. But I think it's important for me to point out that I was very much clouded because I was judging the game against games today, because it just didn't feel like a game that released that many years ago. And you know what, if the licenses are still active, somebody's got to say it. You're on Switch, man. Like, just bring it over to Switch. You've already got the licenses and stuff in place, and it already runs. Just put it on there.
I think the one issue I have with LA is that it is kind of a slog to get going, because they do go for more of those conventional racing game tropes of like we've locked an entire level of cars, and like sometimes it's not incredibly obvious how to find. I think maybe like, modern games have maybe spoiled me on this one. It's not actually that bad, but like, there was one racer I remember like I had to beat to have access to the entire slate of like level 2 cars, and I didn't know to race them because there were like 8 other missions or objectives I had at any given time. And so because I didn't race that person for a very long time, I'm like, why am I still in this 240 SX? So, I think it does kind of take a while to get going in kind of a frustrating way. Maybe that's to pad out the fact that, there aren't a ton of cars in this game. Yeah. Which for me is still kind of the major downside to it, because 3 had so much content. And, LA has like motorcycles, for example, but like there's not many of them. I think there's like 4. There's like, 3 Ducatis maybe, and like a Ninja, like that's it. But yeah, it's a great game. Definitely worth checking out. And, it's interesting because I unfortunately didn't get time to play the portable versions of LA, and 3 also had the version on the PSP as well. But what's funny is that the PSP version of Midnight Club LA, which is LA Remix, a couple weird things about it. One, I believe it's 60 frames per second, which is crazy for like an open world racing game on the PSP. Now, when you compare it to 3 on the PSP and you look like, frame to frame, it looks massively pared down detail wise. They use bloom all over the place, I feel like, to hide the fact that like the textures aren't there and the environmental detail isn't there, but it runs really smoothly. Other interesting thing is that it reuses the LA map from Midnight Club 2.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's another city too. Maybe it's Tokyo. I don't know, but and I think if it's a Tokyo map, then it would have been the one from 3, and the Tokyo map from 3 is actually from 2. So it's an interesting way of carrying forward content if you think about it. Midnight Club LA, you have this game on, at the time, modern platforms, 360 and PS3. You're now, a generation out of step with the PSP was meant to reasonably emulate PS2 level experiences. You can't do that on the PSP now with the 360 and the PS3 coming out. So what do? You take the content for the last entry in the series and you basically carry it over because it could handle that better. So I think it's a really shrewd move by Rockstar and a pretty neat way of going about it, especially because again, these aren't I think as much as we like LA, I think Midnight Club 2 is clearly the darling of this podcast, and to have that experience on the go. Even with all the MCLA furniture around it, it's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think LA is absolutely a game that for me is the ultimate street racer of that kind for me. See that kind of trying to embrace the culture side of it, trying to create a vibrant world that feels alive, that sort of thing. I think it's very hard to find an open world racer that actually goes above and beyond that, aside from the kind of parody-like way that Test Drive Unlimited depicts rich white people and stuff. If you're
see that's what I have no time for.
Yeah, exactly. But Midnight Club LA manages to tread that line nicely of actually having that kind of charming GTA writing pared down for the certificate that it had in terms of audience and stuff, and it does feel. The issue is that at that era of Rockstar game making as well, it's hard to avoid the elephant in the room that LA sort of feels like GTA with the GTA mechanics kind of taken out of it, just because it's such a well-made experience that just inherently feels limited because of what we've seen the other kind of Rockstar games look like and that sort of thing. So, and then the thing you said about it being slow to get going is very true as well, because in the early game those races are so slow. It's right away, I feel in Midnight Club 2 it's fast, frantic arcade thrills.
Yeah.
But in LA, you really have to earn the speed, and then even if you've got cars fast enough, you still need to be good enough, because the physics started to have that more kind of weightier feel that was kind of harder to pull off some of the jumps and stuff as effortlessly as you would in 2, and 2 is about threading the needle. LA is more in that kind of standard racing game experience of kind of balancing risk and reward, and it doesn't make it any less fun, but you pair that with some pretty bullshit AI at times and stuff, and
the rubber banding.
The rubber banding and the actual kind of cornering has that weird kind of speedboaty feel at times as well, perhaps, where you feel as if you're losing speed for no good reason compared to what you would expect in an arcade racer. There are a few little kinks about the overall experience, but what it provides and how it stands up today is absolutely a testament to what was achieved, and that's the worrying part, I guess. LA, as far as Rockstar concerned, maybe closed the book on Midnight Club because they were just this is the crux of what we can make with Midnight Club, and that was that, because it was kind of the swan song for the series, really. I'm not sure why Rockstar dropped it, but if I can theorise, it might just be that they felt as if all they'd be doing is taking it in a new city and doing something very similar. Obviously, had an idea of what they wanted GTA to become more all-encompassing, including the racing side, which is huge in that series now. It's a bit of a shame, really.
Yeah, Rockstar is in an interesting place, and Rockstar gets so much attention from, Bloomberg will publish a story about GTA 6 or something like that, and honestly, it's not something that I really follow, what's happening with Rockstar. I know that the Red Dead Redemption remaster got canned, right?
Yeah.
And that was the studio. San Diego is a studio that's responsible for Red Dead Redemption, and they're also responsible for Midnight Club. So I don't really think that really is going to make a difference in the grand scheme of things. I think if Rockstar really wanted a Midnight Club, there are so many developers in the Take-Two umbrella that would be able to do that for them. But yeah, they They want cash cows. And, you know, it's sad because, like, I think the more that we talk about older games and what franchises we want to come back and stuff, for a long time I was like, we'll see everything return again. But when you look especially at these like AAA names and studios and franchises, it becomes a thing where it's just like, yeah, if there's no way they can monetize the hell out of it, it's never coming back, you know. And then in that scenario, the best you can hope for is they will literally take Midnight Club LA, pay for the licenses again, and re-release on every platform as is, and know they can get like $50 out of, you know, the small group of people that's willing to pay that much for an old game. But otherwise, like, yeah, I just don't see it happening. They have built GTA into the street racing, you know, universe that it's become. And honestly, I do sort of respect them for that a little bit, because like they recognize that there was this one thing in the game that people love doing, and they were like, you know what the hell, let's make a ton of cars, let's like add all of these customizations. Like, you couldn't do the things that you can do in GTA Online to a car now, you could not do at launch. You know, the level of customization is like unheard of. Of course, they also use this as an opportunity to go hard on those microtransactions, though. So it's one of those things where you gotta be careful what you wish for. And yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath for a new Midnight Club. But hey, at least LA is on Series X, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of excitement around the Los Santos Tuners update that came out for GTA, because it's basically Wish.com Midnight Club. Even the trailer and stuff was definitely calling on that element. But the fact of the matter is that Rockstar could have absolutely called that the Midnight Club update or something like that, and purposely tried to gear interest towards the series again. But they obviously feel that the elements of Midnight Club that they really like, they can just integrate directly into GTA, call it a day. If anybody could find a way of monetizing Midnight Club correctly, and that is not the fate I would like the series to go to, but if anybody was trying to find a way to monetize it, then I'm sure 2K and Rockstar would be able to, or Take-Two, sorry. But I think the issue is that, and I think this kind of ties into what we're talking about in Rockstar's situation here, they are not guaranteed hit makers for absolutely everything that they touch. Red Dead 2 was a game that tried something incredibly experimental as far as video games go, by being so ultra realistic and grounded to reality that it isolated a lot of players. It had that kind of mixed to controversial reveal, but the main point about it was that the Red Dead Online experiment was a failure for all intents and purposes. They wanted to guide people towards that type of platform the same way GTA had, and have that same type of ecosystem and try and build that same type of mythos, but it's fair to say at this point that hasn't happened and it's not worked out well. So it puts Rockstar in a very difficult situation, because it means that for GTA 6, and the little bits of information we're already getting so far in terms of how that game might look and what it might be based around and such, would imply that that monetization element that came into fruition through GTA's lifespan will now be a core part of it going forward. And maybe Take-Two feel like Rockstar are best suited to just work on GTA from here on out, which would leave Midnight Club completely out of the picture. It's an interesting scenario. I feel as if, of any type of series perhaps that can live in this live games as a service era, I think GTA Online proves that something like Midnight Club could actually work well if done correctly. It's like we're talking about, if think of the cost it took to make Midnight Club LA back in the day as a AAA racer. Now try making one in this current games climate on these platforms with that level of live service integration and stuff. It's a insanely expensive venture that we're probably not likely to see again, and I think that Rockstar's focus now will probably be on these live experiences as opposed to a kind of standalone street racing game.
Yeah, I mean, you look around at the landscape right now, and it's funny how, you know, we've seen a racing games pared down significantly in terms of the amount of like big name releases over the last several generations, And you look at the big players who are still active. EA has tried to figure out Need for Speed 5 different ways and hasn't done it to a level of success that they would consider good enough. Sony with Gran Turismo, they were happy enough to let Kaz do his thing forever, and none of us know what happened there, but you have to assume that they were like, hey, can we get something out of this? Is there a way that we can get more out of players here? And so, the microtransactions come hammering down, and that's turned a lot of people off, obviously. Microsoft does not care, but they're Microsoft. They're allowed to not care. They're allowed to just throw everything at you in Forza Horizon. It's funny because in Horizon, there's what, like the $80 for like the premium edition, you get everything, but like outside of that, Playground Games just wants your time. They just want you to come in there and do the weekly playlist, get your cars, complete that stuff, come back next week. They're not trying to get you to empty your wallet. So yeah, you would think that there's a way. Honestly, the only platform for monetization I'm seeing that's like winning and people are happy with and like satisfying everyone is like iRacing. And you think that obviously there are people who will never play iRacing because it's iRenting, it's too expensive and everything, but the people who do love it, you would think that like Rockstar out of everyone would be the one to figure out an online living game as a service street racing open world thing. I don't know if I'm wishing for that or not, honestly. I'm so tired of like watching all this stuff happen, but like that's a way that it would make sense for Midnight Club to come back. But I feel like they're so obsessed with just these blockbusters. You're never going to get that from a racing game. Yeah. And so, yeah. And it's funny, too, because just to put a cap on this more philosophical look at everything, the era of Rockstar that we're talking about with LA specifically, like that was, GTA 4, Red Dead Redemption, and remember that table tennis game?
Yeah, of course.
They just put that out there, and that was basically a proof of concept of like the Rage engine, right? Or the engine that they were going to use for maybe GTA 5. And they were like, this is going to be a mini game in a future GTA game, but like, what the hell? Like, we made it. It's funny. No one. I feel like they almost made that game as a bit because they were like, nobody would expect us to do this, right? So why don't we just do it? Yeah. That energy seems to have evaporated from the company now. They don't do that anymore. They don't just like, they're part of one of the biggest multimedia franchises in this industry, and they don't seem to really use that for all it's worth. They don't seem to take odd bets. Rockstar used to be the one to go against the grain, and now they kind of gave up on that. So maybe this is all indicative of sort of a changing of the guard, but whatever the case, only time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the laziest take to say that perhaps the parent company is the one pulling the strings and that sort of thing, but it does seem as if since Take-Two became this all-controlling entity above them, that things have started to be a bit more constricted on Rockstar side of things. But ultimately as well, there's the reality that an entity may exist, but the people within it change, and focuses changes and that sort of thing. What was Rockstar San Diego once is not what it might be now at the end of the day, and I think that's the other thing. Trends change. Street racing fell out of fashion, unless Need for Speed wants to regurgitate it, and then it comes back for a little bit, and we get excited about it.
Right.
But ultimately, is there a place for a Midnight Club game? If you're looking at it from the boring business perspective, maybe Rockstar doesn't think there is, because anybody that wants that kind of hyper-tuning, over-the-top experience for racing is getting it from GTA. It does seem as if that kind of little bit of creative streak is pretty gone at the moment. I was looking up some information about the table tennis game out of curiosity, and it featured an in-depth artificial intelligence engine as well. So obviously it was a nice testing bed for what they wanted to go for. Although I can't see any evidence it's just like, we thought we might as well throw this out which is a surprise because I'd always assumed that was the case as well. It does seem as if they're kind of committed to the idea that it was it was just something they wanted to make. So
I think this is basically anecdotal at this point, but I feel like it was sort of a test bed because I mean everything they did pretty much use the same engine, right? So I feel like it was one of those things, and who's to say where it came from? But no, that's like actually a good example of like release your tech demos. Obviously don't expect people to pay for them if they're broken. But like, if you're like, hey, we're Rockstar, people expect us to, terrorize and ruin the youth, but we're just gonna make a ping pong game for the hell of it, because it's the thing that people would expect us to do last. Like that's. I remember it was pretty amusing, and I downloaded the demo for that back in the day, and I was like, this is cute, but I'm not going to buy the table tennis game, but cool.
There was Rockstar's president, Sam Houser, said about the game that in trying to develop the game's concept, the team was fascinated with concentrating the entire power of the next generation consoles into a singular activity. And that is how the table tennis game came about. They also used it as very intensive, strenuous multiplayer testing because in trying to create the level of realism that the team had created in the single player experience, trying to replicate that in a multiplayer environment was especially difficult. So it does seem as if it's that all of these kind of elements came together. There's something beautiful about the name of it as well. Rockstar Games presents table tennis. Like you wouldn't be daft for thinking at the time perhaps we were going to get other strange like one-shot games, just that Rockstar Games presents subtitle. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's funny because you think about like GT Sport should have been, a test bed for GT7's online. Instead, they decided to find new ways to break it. But that is a good strategy, I think, of just like making us a pared down experience where you're testing all of these things, so that when the final game comes out, there you go, things work.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And I love the fact Rockstar still has the game on its website and stuff, paying homage to its history. It's one of these things. It makes for an easy kind of article about how it was actually more important than you thought for the reasons that you've said, Adam. And then points we've talked about today. It's release your damn tech demos. We'll have fun with it.
We might see another one of those before we see another one of another Midnight Club. I have a feeling that that's entirely possible.
Potentially, and I guess it's another kind of conversation coming to an end on a slightly depressing note, but the difference with this one is that you can genuinely go out there and buy Midnight Club early right now if you've got an Xbox. No strings attached, having to find codes online or find hard copies. You can literally just go on and purchase it because for some reason that is a thing that's possible. Sometimes these backwards compatible Xbox games really confuse me. We have discussed it in Discord multiple times, but like the situation with Driver San Francisco, for example, randomly becoming available on Xbox backwards compatibility at some point about 2 years ago, but it wasn't relisted for sale on the Xbox store, so it was like physical only copies. Like, how does that happen? Why would somebody do that, especially given you can't buy it on any other platforms anyway as well? I think what it is they can do kind of like the background legwork to render the game playable on modern platforms, but if it's something where there's going to be a legal blockade to them selling it again, they maybe won't do that part. But yeah, you're right, like Rockstar I guess must have paid for these licenses until the end of time. I don't know. They were allowed to do that because they were Rockstar. Exactly. They were Rockstar. they do what they want. Maybe not so much anymore, but at the time they did, and they still have those. So yeah, you can still go out there and buy Midnight Club LA, and PS2 copies of and Xbox copies of Midnight Club 2 shouldn't be too hard to find, I imagine, either. But sadly, the Steam version is back in the locker.
Oh yeah, there it is, $15. It's a good enough price instead of paying people who are going to charge out the nose for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Somewhat of a silver lining to end on. But this was a lot of fun, and yeah, I mean, I could see us talking about Midnight Club 3 one day, but at first I was like, we're kind of looking past a major point in the series, but 2, I think 2 is just a fascinating game, and I think LA kind of allows us to focus on where they kind of left things off, and a nice evolution from those 2 points. So it's what we love to do here. What we did with Burnout, we always go for the games that aren't quite.
There are going to be a lot of people who've already talked in depth about 3, and how important that was and what that did, and we'd really just be echoing those statements. It's like you say, Adam, we did it with Burnout as well. There is conversation to be had for these games beyond a footnote, I'd say, like especially 2. I think LA does get all the plaudits in many ways, and it does deserve it. But I think with 2 sometimes it can kind of be forgotten about, since it was a different type of Burnout experience, but by no means worse. Just a very concentrated arcade experience, and all the better for it.
We also, we talked for 40 minutes alone about Midnight Club 2, and we still reference it throughout the LA discussion. So, it's with how long, with how long we end up talking about these games, probably for the best. So,
exactly. That's it. If we talked about every single game, I don't think this pod would ever end.
Right. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us. As always, just a note at the end, reach out to us on Twitter, time_extend. If you want an invite to our Discord, just shoot us a DM. We'll get you in there. And thanks. And see you again next time.
Thanks for listening, guys.